You've been lied to about dealing with narcissists. They told you to stay calm, be patient, be nice, no matter what. They said, if you're kind enough, gentle enough, quiet enough, they'll eventually change. They'll see your worth. But if that were true, why do you still feel like you're walking on eggshells? Why does it always feel like you're giving more and getting less? Why do you still feel small, drained, and never enough? The truth is, being nice to a narcissist doesn't fix them. It feeds them. They don't want your kindness. They want control. They want your silence, your guilt, your endless apologies. And the more you give, the more they take. But Stoic philosophy breaks the cycle. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. They didn't waste time pleasing manipulators. They mastered the art of inner strength. They showed how to protect your peace without shouting, how to say no without guilt, how to walk away without fear. Tonight, you stop trying to win their approval. You stop trying to be the good one and start becoming the strong one. As you listen, something will shift. Your mind will quiet. Your chest will feel lighter. Your power will return. And when tomorrow comes, you won't be afraid of upsetting them. You'll be ready to protect yourself, to set boundaries, to stop being nice, and start being free. This isn't just another lesson. This is your moment. Are you ready? Let's begin. You start to feel it, that quiet strength building beneath the surface, the weight that used to sit on your chest every time they walked into the room. It's starting to lift. The fog is clearing, and in its place, a simple truth is standing tall. You don't need to prove anything to them. You never did. For so long, you were trained to respond, to react, to say something when they mocked you, to defend yourself when they twisted your words, to comfort them after they hurt you. You kept giving them little pieces of yourself, one reaction at a time. You thought it was keeping the peace, but it was only feeding the fire. Every reply, every explanation, every emotional response became fuel for their control. The Stoics knew better. Epictetus, born a slave and yet a master of freedom, understood something most people still haven't learned today. That true power isn't in controlling others, it's in controlling yourself. He taught that if someone can disturb your peace, it's because you gave them the keys to your mind. And that's exactly what narcissists are after. Not your kindness, not your love, but your reaction, your validation, your emotional energy. The moment you pull that away, the game starts to crumble. Narcissists thrive on attention, not just praise, but any kind of emotional investment. You defend yourself, they feel important. You try to fix the relationship, they feel powerful. You cry, you yell, you beg, you explain. They win. Because even your pain centers them. Even your silence, if it's coming from fear or guilt, becomes part of their power. So the goal isn't just to stay quiet. The goal is to disconnect from their need for validation completely. Not coldly, not out of revenge, but from clarity. It starts with this shift. Your worth does not live in someone else's approval, not even a little bit. That idea alone can break the cycle. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." Let that sink in. He didn't say the other person is innocent. He didn't say you deserve to be mistreated. What he said is that the moment someone else pulls your strings and you dance, you've given up control of your own mind. That's what narcissists are counting on, that you will keep needing them to see you, hear you, validate you, that you'll keep reacting. So what happens when you stop? At first, it feels strange, empty even. Like you're breaking a pattern your nervous system has become addicted to. You expect them to be angry, and maybe they are, but you're not angry anymore. You expect them to lash out, and maybe they do, but it doesn't land the way it used to, because now you know your peace is yours. You've learned to keep your energy to yourself, not as punishment, but as protection. When you no longer seek their approval, their ability to punish you disappears. That's how narcissistic control works. It's built on your hope. Your hope that maybe this time, if you're kind enough, calm enough, nice enough, they'll see you differently, that they'll love you the way you love them. But the Stoics didn't rely on hope. They relied on discipline, on the ability to recognize where power truly lives. And it's never in begging for validation from someone who uses it like a weapon. You might still be in contact with them. Maybe it's a family member, a partner, a co-worker. But you're not available the way you used to be. Not emotionally, not mentally. You stop over-explaining. You stop defending yourself against false accusations. You stop clarifying your intentions just so they won't twist your words. You know who you are, and you don't need them to confirm it. That's where the shift happens. Validation is subtle. It's not just compliments. It's the way you try to prove you're not the villain in their story. The way you reread your texts to make sure you don't sound cold. The way you apologize just to keep the peace, even when you've done nothing wrong. Every one of those moments is a thread they use to pull you back in. And when you cut those threads, they lose grip, not just over your actions, but over your thoughts. Stoicism doesn't ask you to become emotionless. It asks you to become aware, to recognize that not every thought deserves your attention, that not every person deserves your energy, and that silence, when it comes from clarity, not fear, is the most powerful message you'll ever send. Because it says, I am no longer available for manipulation. There will be moments where they try harder. Narcissists don't like losing control. They'll provoke you, flatter you, guilt-trip you, test you. They'll try to draw you into the old dance with phrases like, so now you don't care anymore, or, wow, I guess you've changed. But you don't flinch, because you have changed. You no longer hand your power to people who abuse it. When you stop reacting, they call you cold. When you stop explaining, they call you cruel. But that's not the truth. You're not being cruel, you're being clear. And that's what they fear most. Because once you're clear, they can't confuse you anymore. You start to see through their tactics, and their words lose their edge. You realize that you were never the problem. You were just the one who cared too much, in a place where that care was taken for granted. That ends now. From a Stoic lens, your job is to tend to your own character. That's it. What others say, how they twist your intentions, how they react to your boundaries, that's not your responsibility. Epictetus taught that some things are within our control and some things aren't. Your actions, your values, your words, those are yours. Their ego, their games, their approval, that belongs to them. Let them keep it. Let them spiral. Let them chase validation elsewhere. You're done playing that part. It takes practice. You'll slip up sometimes. You'll feel the urge to explain, to fix, to fight for your side of the story. That's okay. You're unlearning years of conditioning. What matters is that you come back to this truth. Your value does not rise or fall based on how they see you. You are not here to keep them happy. You are here to protect your peace. Narcissists fear your detachment because it leaves them powerless. But that's not your concern. You're not detaching to punish them. You're detaching to protect the part of yourself that was always worthy, but spent too long looking for proof in the wrong places. You no longer hand them your emotions like weapons. You don't need them to understand you anymore. That need was keeping you stuck. Now you simply understand yourself. You respond when you choose to. You engage when it aligns with your values. You withdraw when it doesn't. Not with anger, not with drama, just with quiet confidence. Because when your self-worth isn't built on their validation, they can't take it from you. There's a freedom in this, a stillness you might not have felt in years. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care deeply, but you've stopped leaking that care into a void. You've stopped watering a plant that was never going to grow. You've stopped hoping that someone who constantly misunderstands you will one day decide to finally see you. You see yourself now, and that's enough. So you go about your day with a lighter step. You don't dread the next conversation. You don't rehearse your responses. You don't stay up replaying the argument in your head. You know where your boundaries are. You know what you'll tolerate. You know what kind of peace you're building. That's the life Stoicism teaches you to create. Not a life free of difficulty, but a life where you are free from unnecessary suffering. You've learned that true validation doesn't come from their approval. It comes from how well you guard your integrity, how calmly you walk away from chaos, how steadily you stay true to your values, even when no one claps for it. And when you feel that old urge to explain yourself rising again, pause. Take a breath. Return to your center. Ask yourself, does this serve my peace, or does it feed their ego? Then choose accordingly. This is the new way forward. You're not looking for their validation. You're not waiting for their apology. You're not hoping for their understanding. You're anchored, clear, unavailable for manipulation, available only for truth. And the best part? They can feel it. They know something has changed. You're no longer playing the part they wrote for you. You've left the stage, and you've taken your power with you. Not with a fight, with silence, with strength, with sovereignty. You are no longer a source of their supply. You are a source of your own peace, and that changes everything. And just like that, you stop being their mirror. You stop reflecting their moods, their words, their chaos. You stop bending yourself to keep the peace. You stop searching their face for permission to feel okay. You no longer play their game, not because you're cold, but because you're awake. And now that you've pulled your energy back from the places it was being drained, something else begins to stir. A deeper shift, not just in how you act, but in how you see. Because there's still one more piece they use to control you: perspective. When you're close to a fire, all you feel is the heat. All you think about is the burn. But take a few steps back and something changes. You start to see it for what it is: small, contained, manageable. You stop panicking, and you realize you don't need to run. You just need to stop standing so close. Narcissists make their world feel like the only world. Their crisis becomes your crisis. Their insults feel like truth. Their praise feels like oxygen. Everything is urgent. Everything is personal. But what if it's not? What if their words don't have to define your day? What if their moods aren't your responsibility? What if their manipulations are just noise, and you've been standing too close for too long? That's where the Stoics lead you next. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and student of life, had access to unimaginable power. But even he knew that real strength didn't come from control over others. It came from control over perspective. In his meditations, he returned again and again to one idea, a practice that would make even the heaviest emotions feel lighter. He called it seeing from above, taking yourself out of the narrow view and seeing your life and theirs from a higher, wider place. The moment you do this, something breaks. Not in you, but in their hold on you. Because when you zoom out, you stop reacting like they're the center of your world. You begin to see that their behavior, no matter how loud or cruel, is small in the context of your life. And more importantly, you realize it's not about you. It never was. They may throw accusations like daggers. They may twist stories to stay in control. They may create drama just to stay relevant. But from a higher view, it all starts to look like a pattern, a cycle they've likely repeated with others. Not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of their wound. And when you can see it that way, you stop needing to fix it. You stop needing to win the argument. You stop needing to change their mind, because you've changed your view. This shift doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care wisely. It doesn't make you heartless. It makes you sovereign. The practice is simple in form, but powerful in effect. When you're caught in the emotion of it, when the narcissist is pressing your buttons or pulling on your guilt, pause. Take a breath. Then mentally rise. Picture yourself stepping back, further and further, pulling out from the scene, from the room, from the building, from the city, further still. The person who feels unbearable suddenly looks different, small, temporary. One person among billions, one moment among millions. This isn't detachment in the cold sense, it's detachment in the liberating sense. You're not erasing reality, you're expanding it, you're widening the frame, and in doing so, you take back your peace. From this place, you stop obsessing over their opinion. You stop overthinking that one sentence they said. You stop holding your breath for their validation. Why? Because the game only works when your world shrinks down to them, when you make them your son, your judge, your measure of enough. But when you step outside that lens, when you hold space for your whole life, your growth, your values, your journey, their voice becomes quieter. Not because it changed, but because it's no longer the loudest thing in your head. That is the power of a higher view. You also start to see their behavior with clarity, not mystery. Narcissists want confusion. They want you guessing. Am I the problem? Did I overreact? Maybe they're right. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But when you view from above, the fog lifts. You see that gaslighting is not complexity, it's cruelty in disguise. You see that love bombing followed by withdrawal is not passion, it's a tactic. You see that hot and cold behavior is not a trauma bond, it's manipulation dressed up as intimacy. From a distance, the puzzle pieces fit together, and suddenly you stop playing detective in a story that was never about truth. You realize you don't need more data. You don't need more apologies. You don't need to understand why they act the way they do. You just need to stand far enough back to remember who you are. This shift affects everything. You don't argue the same way anymore because you no longer feel the need to convince them of your worth. You don't spiral when they ghost you because you see the pattern and you know it's not about you. You don't chase after closure because you've already found it in clarity. This isn't about superiority. The Stoics weren't interested in being better than others. They were interested in truth. And the truth is, when you stay too close to chaos, you start mistaking it for normal. When you don't pull back, you forget there's a world beyond their control. The view from above gives you access to that world again. It helps you remember that you have a future that has nothing to do with their approval. That there are people out there who don't play games to feel powerful. That peace isn't something you earn by staying silent through mistreatment. It's something you claim by stepping into your full self. When you start practicing this shift regularly, something else happens. Your nervous system starts to trust you again, because you're no longer reacting from survival. You're responding from awareness. You're seeing their chaos, and you're saying, "That's not mine to carry." You're seeing their guilt trips and replying, "I see what this is, and I'm not playing." And over time, you stop losing sleep over people who used to control your entire day. This mental space doesn't just help you survive narcissistic relationships. It helps you rewire your relationship with yourself. You stop over-personalizing. You stop making their bad behavior a measure of your value. You stop over-correcting every time someone disapproves, because now you see how small those moments really are. The Stoics weren't removed from emotion. They were just masters of proportion. They knew that pain, when zoomed in too close, feels like the whole world. But when you zoom out, when you remember how brief life is, how vast the universe is, how fast time moves, the pain becomes bearable. It becomes something you can carry, not something that crushes you. You start using this view in more than just conflicts. You use it when you're tempted to doubt yourself. You use it when fear creeps in. You use it when someone tries to pull you back into the old role of fixer, savior, pleaser. You pause, you rise, you breathe. You remember, this moment is not the whole picture. And from that place, you choose wisely. You choose which battles are worth your breath. You choose which conversations deserve your heart. You choose which people earn your time, not by begging, but by honoring your peace. It's a quiet strength. No fireworks, no grand speeches, just calm decisions made from a higher view. And yes, there will be moments where your view slips, where you get pulled back into the drama, where you find yourself reacting, defending, proving again. That's okay. You're not failing. You're learning. The beauty of this practice is that it's always available. You can return to it any time, even in the middle of conflict, even after you lose your center. You can pause, rise, and reclaim the bigger picture. That's what Marcus Aurelius did, daily. As an emperor, a soldier, a philosopher. He faced betrayal, stress, and disappointment on levels most people never will. And yet he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This wasn't a theory for him. It was survival, and it can be yours too. Because once you've seen the view from above, you can never unsee it. You walk differently, speak differently, choose differently. You stop living like you owe anyone your peace. You stop apologizing for taking up space in your own life. And you start building something that no narcissist can touch: perspective, clarity, freedom. So the next time they raise their voice, rise higher. The next time they try to guilt you, pull back. The next time they rewrite history to stay in control, look down from that quiet hilltop in your mind and say to yourself, "This is not my truth. This is not my storm. This is not my prison. I'm done standing close to the fire. I can see clearly now, and I choose peace." This is the view from above. This is where you begin again, on your terms, with your eyes wide open, and the rest of your life waiting to meet you. And once you've seen things from above, it changes what you're willing to carry. You stop letting guilt shape your decisions. You stop giving your time to people who thrive on emotional chaos. You stop allowing manipulation to feel like obligation, because from a higher place, you understand something that used to be hidden. Guilt is often the tool, not the truth. And when someone needs you to feel bad in order to feel powerful, the most dangerous thing you can do is not fall for it. But how do you actually get there? How do you stay steady when someone's guilt-tripping you with words like, "After everything I've done for you," or "I guess I just don't matter to you anymore"? How do you hold your boundaries when your chest tightens and your mind starts spinning, telling you that maybe they're right, maybe you are the problem? That's where the deeper work begins, and the Stoics knew exactly where to start. You train for it. You don't wait until you're in the storm to start building your shelter. You practice discomfort on purpose. You rehearse difficulty, not to suffer, but to become unshakable when the moment arrives. And for the Stoics, this wasn't just a mindset. It was a habit, a daily practice, because they understood something most people still resist. If you want to be free, you have to become strong enough to withstand pressure, especially the emotional kind. Seneca taught this with urgency. He warned that comfort makes us fragile, and fragility makes us vulnerable to the worst kind of harm, not pain, but manipulation. When you've never trained yourself to sit with discomfort, even small emotional pressure can make you fold. But when you've practiced staying calm in hard conditions, you stop being so easy to move. And narcissists? They are experts at using guilt like a lever. They don't need truth on their side. They just need you to feel bad. If they can make you uncomfortable enough, they know you'll give in. That's the tactic. They don't argue to understand. They accuse to corner. Their words are designed to make you feel responsible for their emotions, their chaos, even their past. And once you feel responsible, you give up control. But here's the truth the Stoics lived by. You can train your mind to hold that discomfort without collapsing. You can teach yourself to sit with guilt without obeying it. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes to see guilt for what it really is, a sensation, not a command. This practice begins with small decisions. You say no to something you'd normally say yes to, just to avoid a reaction. You hold your ground when you know they're baiting you into feeling bad. You let someone feel disappointed without rushing to fix it. And yes, it feels hard. Your chest might tighten, your mind might panic, but you stay, you breathe, you observe. And in that moment, you realize something powerful. Discomfort won't break you. You can survive it. You don't need to escape it by people-pleasing. You don't need to explain yourself into exhaustion. You don't need to earn forgiveness for things you never did wrong. You just need to sit with the emotion and let it pass. That's what voluntary discomfort builds. Tolerance, not apathy, not avoidance, but real emotional strength. The kind that lets you look someone in the eye while they try to shame you and not flinch. The kind that lets you walk away without needing them to understand why. The kind that stays steady even when their words are sharp, their tone is cold, and their timing is cruel. This is not easy work. It takes time, because guilt doesn't just live in the mind, it lives in the body. It shows up as pressure in your chest, a knot in your stomach, a voice in your head whispering, "Just give in, just make them happy." But when you've trained through discomfort, you know that voice isn't truth, it's habit, and habits can be broken. Seneca practiced sleeping on the floor, eating basic meals, wearing rough clothes, not to punish himself, but to remind himself that he could endure discomfort and still be free. In the same way, you can practice small acts that remind your nervous system, "I can do hard things and still be okay." It might be something as simple as going for a walk without your phone, just to feel the itch of disconnection and not scratch it. It might be holding a boundary in a conversation, even when your hands are shaking. It might be staying quiet while they try to provoke you, because you know you don't need to defend what's already true. And each time you do it, something shifts. You start to respect yourself more, not because you're winning, but because you're no longer abandoning yourself just to keep the peace. You stop bending your truth to avoid tension. You stop apologizing for doing what's right for you. And here's what narcissists can't stand. They lose their grip the moment guilt stops working. When they accuse you and you don't rush to explain. When they play the victim and you don't jump into rescue mode. When they withhold affection and you don't beg for it back. That's when the game falls apart. Because what they count on is your discomfort being louder than your values. So you practice turning the volume down. You expose yourself to small discomforts, not to be hard, but to be honest. You tell someone no and sit with the awkward silence. You walk away from an argument you used to fight to win. You let people misinterpret you, and you don't go chasing after their understanding. And slowly, you stop being controlled by the fear of being misunderstood. You stop treating someone's disappointment as proof that you failed. You stop rushing to fix things that were never yours to fix in the first place. This doesn't mean you become numb. You'll still feel. You'll still care. But you'll care wisely. You'll feel deeply without being consumed. And that's what stoic strength looks like. Not emotionless, but untouchable by manipulation. You also begin to see patterns you missed before. You notice how guilt-tripping always shows up at the exact moment you try to set a boundary, how their hurt feelings only appear when you say no, how their compliments always come right before a request. You see the rhythm, the script, the setup, and instead of falling into the trap, you step over it. That's what training does. It creates awareness. You no longer respond to guilt blindly. You respond with intention. You ask, is this mine to carry? And more often than not, the answer is no. You don't need to explain your peace. You don't need to prove your goodness by sacrificing your mental health. And you don't need to live in fear of being seen as the villain in their story. Let them tell it. You're not here to control the narrative. You're here to live in alignment. This is how you become immune to emotional blackmail, not by building walls, but by building resilience. You don't stop caring. You stop over-functioning. You stop over-apologizing. You stop over-giving in exchange for crumbs of approval. And when they say, you've changed, they're right. You've changed in the most important way. You're no longer available for manipulation that wears the mask of love. You're no longer seduced by guilt that pretends to be connection. You're no longer afraid of tension because you've trained your body to know it won't destroy you. And that training becomes your shield. It allows you to move through life with a new kind of grace. The grace that comes from not abandoning yourself, from choosing integrity over comfort, from choosing truth over appeasement. And if that makes someone uncomfortable, let it. You're not here to soothe someone else's dysfunction. You're here to stand in your clarity. Every act of voluntary discomfort is a step closer to that clarity. Every small moment of saying no, of holding your ground, of letting the silence speak for you, these are your reps, your mental strength, your emotional armor. And over time, guilt stops working. Not because you've become hard, but because you've become whole. You're no longer afraid of the weight of your own truth. You're no longer trying to protect people from their own reactions. You're no longer carrying blame that doesn't belong to you. This is what it means to rehearse misfortune, not to live in fear, but to live in freedom. To know that you can feel guilt and still choose your peace, that you can feel discomfort and still act in integrity, that you can feel the urge to please and still say no. And once you know that, no narcissist can use guilt to hold you hostage ever again. You've trained for this. You're ready. And once you've built that quiet resistance to guilt, something becomes clear. You were never powerless. The discomfort they used to weaponize was never your enemy. It was your teacher. And now that you've learned to sit with it, not flinch from it, You've earned the ability to do what most people never dare to. Take full responsibility for your energy. No more reacting to get peace. No more giving to be liked. No more explaining just to be understood. You stop feeding the system that's been draining you from the start. And for the first time, you understand the root of it all, the supply chain. Narcissists don't just want your presence. They want your reaction. They want your attention, your emotional labor, your time, your confusion, your need for closure. This is what fuels them. This is how they stay in control, not by force, but by access. They don't always break down doors. Sometimes they wait for you to leave the door cracked open. And here's where the shift happens. You realize they don't stop on their own. They don't wake up and say, maybe I should stop draining this person. They don't suddenly lose interest in controlling the narrative. They only stop when they no longer have access to what keeps them powerful, your energy. This is where the stoic lens becomes non-negotiable. You stop waiting for them to change. You stop hoping they'll realize what they're doing. You stop making their behavior the focus. And instead, you do the one thing they can't undo. You cut the supply. Not with cruelty, not with punishment, but with precision. Stoicism teaches that what's outside your control should never dominate your life. And here's the hard truth. It is not your job to fix the narcissist. It is not your job to get them to see you. It is not your job to keep explaining your perspective. It is your job to take full responsibility for where your energy goes. That's the only control you ever really had. And now it's time to use it. When you see that every emotional response is a transaction, it changes how you show up, because they're not always looking for praise. Sometimes they thrive on your defensiveness. They thrive on your anger. Even your silence, if it's laced with guilt or anxiety, keeps the connection alive. They know they still have space in your mind, and for them, that's enough. Cutting supply doesn't mean cutting contact, although sometimes that's necessary too. Cutting supply means cutting the emotional current. You stop showing up with emotional offerings. You stop being the one to fix the mood, clarify the misunderstanding, fill the awkward silence. You stop responding like you owe them your peace just because they're uncomfortable without it. They might say you're being distant, cold, heartless, but what you're actually being is sovereign. You've simply decided that not everyone deserves your energy, especially when they misuse it. And for the first time, you're applying the one rule Stoicism returns to again and again. Protect what's yours, not your reputation, not your ego, your peace, your inner world. The part of you that determines how you move through life, no matter who you're dealing with. This requires a new kind of awareness. You start asking yourself, am I giving energy to this out of habit or choice? You pause before you reply to that baiting message. You resist the urge to explain your intentions one more time. You hear the sarcasm in their voice, and you choose silence over reaction. Because now you're watching the patterns, not just their words. You're watching the energy exchange. And that's when things begin to shift. When they no longer get the same emotional return, they escalate or disappear. That's the test. That's where most people get pulled back in. Because the moment they pull away, your nervous system remembers the old dance. You start thinking, maybe I should say something, maybe I should fix this. But what you're actually feeling is the discomfort of withdrawal from a system that was never fair to begin with. When someone has fed off your emotions for long enough, your silence will feel like starvation, and their panic might show up in different forms: love bombing, sudden kindness, rage, guilt-tripping. But none of it is real connection. It's just the system trying to rewire itself. This is where you hold the line, Because the person who manipulates your empathy is not confused. They're strategic. And every time you return to comfort them, explain yourself, or smooth over their reactions, the message you send is clear. You still have access to me, even if your words say otherwise. So now, you make a different decision. You don't argue, you don't prove, you don't beg. You remove yourself from the role you were never meant to play. You stop being the source of energy they never earned, and you learn to sit in the quiet that comes after breaking the cycle. Because yes, it can feel strange at first. You're not just cutting the supply for them, you're cutting it for the version of you that thought you had to give and give and give just to feel safe. You're letting go of a survival pattern, one where your identity was tied to keeping the peace, being agreeable, making sure nobody's upset with you. But peace that depends on you being emotionally depleted is not peace, it's performance. And when you stop performing, you start healing. Cutting the supply is not about being better than them, it's about being loyal to yourself. You stop tolerating the people who confuse your silence for weakness. You stop keeping the doors open for those who only knock when they're hungry for control. And most of all, you stop expecting them to suddenly become accountable for the things they've always blamed you for. This is what Stoicism teaches at its core. You do not control how others behave. You only control how you respond. But let's go deeper. You don't even owe a response every time. Silence, when chosen from clarity, is a full sentence. Walking away is a statement. No longer explaining yourself is closure. And in that decision, you reclaim your space. You start choosing who gets access, not based on history, not based on shared blood, not based on guilt, but based on how they show up, based on how they treat your boundaries, based on whether they honor your time, your words, your presence. You shift from being emotionally available to anyone who demands it, to being emotionally committed only to those who've earned it. And it changes everything. You stop feeling exhausted after every interaction. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop shrinking to make them comfortable. Because you're no longer playing your part in their performance. You're writing your own story. Cutting supply isn't about isolation. It's about clarity. You can still love people without letting them drain you. You can still care without carrying. You can still forgive without forgetting who they showed you they are. Because now you understand that your attention is currency, and you've been handing it out like it's worthless. Not anymore. This is the truth most people avoid. No narcissist can manipulate you without your participation. It's not about blame. It's about responsibility, and responsibility is power. You stop making excuses for why you keep feeding the dynamic. You stop hoping they'll evolve if you just love them harder. You start protecting your peace like it's the most valuable thing you own, because it is. You start asking real questions. What part of me still wants their approval? What part of me is afraid to walk away? What am I still hoping to prove, and why? You stop waiting for closure and realize it's in your hands. It always was. The moment you stop supplying what they're addicted to, attention, emotional reaction, validation, they start to fade from your system, maybe not physically, but emotionally. And that's where the real freedom begins. You'll see the shift. They'll say things like, "You're different now. You don't care anymore. You've changed." They'll be right. Because you finally understand what they don't. Your peace is not up for trade. Your energy is not a resource they can drain without consequence. You're not their mirror, not their savior, not their emotional anchor. You are responsible for what you give, and you've decided to give yourself back. No need for revenge. No need for dramatic exits, just clear, calm, consistent boundaries backed by quiet strength. This is the new way forward, where your energy is sacred, where your silence is chosen, where your worth is no longer handed out to those who abuse it. And as that clarity takes root, something powerful happens. You stop looking for them to change, because you've already changed everything that matters. And when you finally stop handing them your energy, you see the truth behind what you once called kindness. You start questioning every moment you stayed quiet to avoid conflict, every time you smiled while hurting, every apology you gave just to make them feel better. You begin to realize that what you thought was kindness wasn't kindness at all. It was survival. It was fear. It was self-erasure, dressed up as politeness. This is the part where the world's definition of kindness starts to fall apart. You were taught to be nice, to be agreeable, to never be the reason someone else feels uncomfortable. But that kind of kindness, when used in the presence of manipulation, becomes dangerous, because it stops being a gift and starts becoming a weakness, something they exploit to keep you silent, compliant, and stuck. Stoicism never asked you to be nice. It asked you to be just. And there's a difference. Niceness bends, justice stands. Niceness says yes to avoid tension. Justice says what is true, even when it shakes the ground. Niceness makes everyone else comfortable at your expense. Justice makes things fair, starting with you. When Seneca and Marcus Aurelius spoke of virtue, they didn't describe it as making others happy. They described it as aligning with reason, truth, and justice. And that means kindness isn't always soft. Sometimes it's sharp. Sometimes it says no. Sometimes it walks away. Sometimes it says, "You don't get to treat me this way, not because I hate you, but because I've learned to respect myself." And that is what narcissists can't handle. They don't fear cruelty. They thrive in it. They know how to play in chaos. But fairness, boundaries, measured strength that doesn't shout but doesn't budge either, that's where their games collapse. Because when your kindness comes from justice, not fear, not guilt, not people-pleasing, they can't control it. They can't twist it. They can't use it against you. They can't pretend it's obligation. They either meet it with mutual respect or they fall away. When you stop seeing kindness as something you owe and start seeing it as something you choose, everything changes. You no longer give to be seen as good. You give when it's right. You speak up even when your voice shakes. You disappoint people when the alternative is betraying yourself. And most of all, you stop mistaking self-abandonment for compassion. You become firm but not cold, clear but not cruel, decisive but not detached from your values. This is stoic kindness, and it's a kindness with edges. It protects as much as it offers. It's rooted in justice, because justice is what makes kindness real. If it's not just, it's not love. If it's not grounded in truth, it's not care. If it's only given to avoid rejection, it's not virtue, it's fear. You start to look back at every moment you gave more than you had and realize you were trying to be seen as good by someone who only saw you as useful. That's the difference between justice and people-pleasing. One is built on dignity, the other is built on survival. You were not wrong for caring, but it's time to care in a new way, with boundaries, with self-respect, with the wisdom to know when someone is only around to take. This is what Stoicism offers, a deeper filter. Before you act, before you speak, you pause and ask, is this kind, or is this just safe? If it's safe but dishonest, you don't say it. If it's kind but firm, you stand by it. If it's true but uncomfortable, you let it live. Because justice doesn't serve comfort. It serves truth. This lens helps you identify the difference between selfless and self-neglecting. Selfless actions come from abundance. You give because it overflows from a grounded place. Self-neglecting actions come from fear. You give because you're afraid of the consequences if you don't. The first builds connection. The second builds resentment. And resentment is the quiet poison that turns kindness into a lie. So you shift. You slow down. You start making decisions from the inside out, not from fear of being seen a certain way, but from alignment with what's fair. Not just fair to them, fair to you. That means no longer accepting apologies that come with conditions, no longer giving multiple chances just because you're scared to look harsh, no longer helping someone who only remembers you when they need something, no longer softening your truth so they feel comfortable ignoring it. This isn't hardening your heart. This is letting your heart finally tell the truth. You realize that kindness without justice always asks you to give too much, to forgive too fast, to hold your tongue when something needs to be said, to offer love where there's no respect. And slowly, it erodes you. Stoic kindness, on the other hand, makes space for discomfort. It says, I can love you and still say no. It says, I can be polite and still protect myself. It says, I will not hurt you, but I will not allow you to hurt me, and call it love. You stop confusing silence with peace. You stop confusing tolerance with maturity. You stop confusing passivity with strength. And you begin to feel what justice really is. Not punishment, not retribution, but balance. The kind of balance that says, my needs matter too. The kind of balance that knows when to step in and when to step away. This is especially important when dealing with narcissists, because they will always try to define your kindness for you. They will say things like, if you really cared, you'd forgive me. Or, if you were a good person, you'd give me another chance. Or, you're just being selfish now. But here's what they don't understand. Real kindness isn't built on demand. It's built on discernment. You're not withholding love. You're offering truth. And sometimes the truth is, I can't let you near me anymore. Sometimes the truth is, you crossed a line I will not unsee. Sometimes the truth is, what you call love was control, and I'm not going back. These are not cruel truths. These are just truths. They are what set you free. They are what build a life where you don't have to keep recovering from people you let stay too long. You begin to respect yourself in a new way. Not because you've become hardened, not because you've stopped loving, but because you've started choosing who gets the privilege of your love. You learn that your kindness is a powerful force, and like any power, it must be guarded, directed, protected. You don't just hand it out to anyone who asks for it. You give it where it grows, where it's matched, where it's valued. You also learn that being just sometimes means being misunderstood. People who benefited from your softness may not like your strength. People who relied on your compliance may call your boundaries selfish. People who were comfortable with your silence may say you've changed. And you have. You've stopped performing a version of kindness that costs you your health, your peace, your truth. And you've started practicing a kind of kindness that can't be manipulated. Because it doesn't need to be liked to exist. It just needs to be aligned. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like quietly walking away. Sometimes it looks like letting someone misjudge you and not rushing to fix it. Sometimes it looks like protecting your space, your time, your energy, not with walls, but with wisdom. You're not less loving because you stopped making excuses for people. You're not less good because you stopped making peace with behavior that hurt you. You're not less kind because you finally told the truth, even when it shook things. You're becoming just. And that's what Stoicism calls real virtue. Not the performance of goodness, but the practice of it. The kind that knows when to say yes, when to say no, and when to say nothing at all. The kind that no longer allows kindness to be your cage. The kind that makes you free. And once you begin living from justice instead of approval, something powerful happens. Your words become intentional. You no longer speak to smooth things over. You no longer explain yourself just to be understood. You stop using your voice as a way to stay safe in places that are not safe for your spirit. And what fills that space, once full of apologies and justifications, is something even more powerful. Silence. Not the kind that hides or avoids, but the kind that speaks without needing sound. The kind that says more than words ever could. The kind that rattles people who rely on your reactions to feel in control. In Stoic philosophy, Zeno taught that words are tools, not weapons, not noise, not something to be wasted. Speech, he believed, should serve virtue. It should align with reason, with value, with restraint. And when it doesn't, it's better to say nothing. In a world where people talk to prove, to provoke, to dominate, choosing silence becomes a radical act of strength. In the context of a narcissistic relationship, silence becomes something else entirely. It becomes protection. It becomes clarity. Because what narcissists want more than anything is your voice. Not for connection, but for control. They want your defense, your explanation, your apology, your anger, your confusion. They want your words because your words give them proof that they still matter to you. Even your outrage feeds them. This is why silence, when chosen from clarity, is devastating to a narcissist's control. It ends the loop. It breaks the script. It forces them to sit in the emptiness they're always trying to avoid. But silence is not easy at first. It feels wrong when you've spent your whole life explaining, fixing, rescuing. You've been trained to speak every time someone misunderstands you. You've been told that if you don't reply, you're weak, rude, or dishonest. But silence rooted in integrity is none of those things. It is presence without performance. It begins with small choices. You start recognizing when a response is not required. When someone provokes you with accusations that twist your words, you feel the urge to defend, but you don't. You feel the pressure to clarify, but you resist. You recognize that nothing you say will change their mind, because their mind is already made up. You start choosing peace over persuasion. You stop offering your voice to conversations that are not grounded in respect. You stop reacting to guilt trips. You stop explaining yourself to people who never cared to listen in the first place. And you realize that silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because silence gives you time to think, to return to yourself, to ask, is this worth my energy? It creates a pause between their chaos and your response. That pause is where your power lives. This is not the silence of avoidance. It is the silence of someone who no longer negotiates with manipulation. Someone who has learned that not everything deserves a reply. Someone who refuses to give their peace away in the name of being polite. This kind of silence comes from deep self-respect. It's not cold, it's clear. It doesn't seek revenge. It seeks stillness. It doesn't scream, "I'm right." It simply stops engaging where dignity is not present. When you practice this, you'll see how people react. Some will respect it. Others, especially those used to feeding off your attention, will escalate. They may become louder, meaner, more desperate for a response. But your silence will hold, because it's not the absence of words, it's the presence of boundaries. In Stoic thinking, this is alignment with nature. Nature doesn't rush to explain, it simply is. A mountain doesn't argue with the storm. A tree doesn't plead with the wind. They stay rooted, grounded. That's what silence teaches you, to stay rooted while the storm passes. And when the narcissist realizes they can no longer trigger you, the game starts to fall apart. Without your voice to keep the performance alive, they are left with their own noise. And often, that silence exposes what your words used to protect, the lie. Your words once filled in the blanks, covered the gaps, made their behavior seem normal. Without them, everything becomes visible. Their manipulation, their lack of accountability, their patterns. Your silence holds up a mirror, and it forces them to confront what they've been avoiding. But that's not your responsibility anymore. Silence also gives you space to observe, to see who tries to earn your voice and who expects it without effort. You start noticing who speaks to understand and who speaks to dominate. You begin saving your energy for those who respect it. In conversations where you used to feel small, your silence becomes the thing that makes you tall. You don't fill the awkward gaps with fake laughter. You don't overshare just to be liked. You don't downplay your needs to avoid tension. You let the silence speak for you. Because it does speak. It says, "I'm not available for this game." It says, "You don't get to decide my truth." It says, "I know who I am, and I no longer need your permission." This is a different kind of power, one that doesn't depend on being louder. It depends on being anchored. You also begin to see that silence doesn't mean shutting down emotionally. You still feel deeply. You still care. But now, your care is selective. Now, your expression is intentional. You're not silent because you have nothing to say. You're silent because not everything deserves to be said. You stop oversharing with people who use your vulnerability against you. You stop offering clarity to those who distort your words. You stop speaking into voids that only echo back manipulation. Instead, you speak less and listen more, not to others, but to yourself. You start hearing your intuition again. You start hearing what you've been silencing all along, your truth. And it's been waiting patiently for you to create space for it. In Stoic practice, silence is not about being passive. It's about being aligned. It's about speaking when it serves virtue, and withholding speech when it would only serve ego, yours or theirs. Narcissists want you in your ego. They want you defending, performing, reacting, because that's where they win. But when you stay silent, not from fear but from clarity, they have nothing to hold on to. You'll notice a strange peace in this practice. You'll feel lighter. You'll stop replaying conversations in your mind. You'll stop second-guessing what you said because you'll be saying less, but with more meaning. And that alone can begin to rebuild your sense of self. Silence becomes your reset, your anchor, your boundary. It becomes the place you return to when things feel heavy, the pause that prevents you from spiraling, the space where your thoughts settle before they become words. And the more you practice it, the more you realize you never owed anyone a response they weren't willing to earn. You never had to defend yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You never had to explain your worth to someone who only listened to what suited them. You just needed permission to stop. That permission lives in silence, not the silence of fear, the silence of self-possession, where you say nothing, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've said enough, where your stillness is not absence, but presence, where your silence is not surrender, but strength. This is how Stoicism reshapes the role of your voice. You use it when it builds, when it clarifies, when it connects, and when it doesn't, you return to the power that doesn't need to speak to be heard. The power that knows when to let noise collapse into itself. And that is the kind of power no narcissist can touch. You've seen the truth now. Kindness without wisdom becomes self-destruction. Silence, when rooted in clarity, becomes power. Boundaries are no longer optional, they're sacred. And the energy you once gave away so freely, it's yours again. You've stopped chasing their approval. You've stopped defending your worth. You've stopped mistaking guilt for connection. Now, you move differently, calmer, stronger, untouchable in ways they'll never understand. Because you're not playing their game anymore. You're living by stoic law now, rooted in reason, driven by virtue, and completely in control of the one thing they can never take from you, your mind. So don't just listen to this once. Come back to it when you feel yourself slipping into old patterns. Let it remind you, you owe no one your peace, not even the ones who demand it the loudest. If you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and write, "I reclaim my energy." Let the world know this time, you're not going back. And if this spoke to something deep inside you, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. There's more where this came from. More clarity, more strength, more tools to build the life you deserve on your terms. Your transformation doesn't end here. It starts now.